I'm using a flip camera here with, luckily we have a person in our class who is a director, a film director, has produced some stunning award-winning films. Sean, you've probably read his credits before.
Yeah.
You see him a lot of times at the Knicks games. He's right on the sidelines there with some of the other big New York names there and stuff like that. But anyway, so and by the way, Sean, take a picture of yourself using that camera.
Is that possible?
No, I don't think so. But anyway, it's probably not possible. But anyway, this is just a little flip camera. I keep it with me all the time because I do these things called Mad Minutes and I do other things. I like to have it with me because I notice that especially if I'm lecturing on stuff where we don't have a book for this part of it, which we don't for the liquor, the wine, spirits, and beers thing. This way you'll have it on a recording. And this way, if something happens to me, if I'm run over by a bus or something like that, this class can go on, next semester, and they can pay my heirs. All right. So we're going to talk about alcoholic beverages. All right, and we're going to start by talking about wines. We're going to do about 15 minutes, and then we're going to cut it and do something else. Okay. So wines are made from grapes. I mean, all real wine is made from grapes. You'll hear people say, well, I had some blueberry wine or cranberry wine or something. That is technically wine, but it's not really what we would call wine. Wine is made from grapes, and certainly the wine you're going to sell in your restaurants pretty much is made from grapes. So wine is made by picking grapes when there is certain ripeness and acidity. Wine grapes are not table grapes. All right, table grapes would be things like, what would be an example of a table grape? What would be, of a variety of table grape? Like a seedless or something like that. What do they call it? Thompson seedless. That would be a table grape. Table grapes, grapes that you just eat, don't make good wine. Wine comes from grapes that really don't taste that good if you just eat them. Well, some of them do. Like a Riesling actually does taste pretty good, but a Riesling grape. But most of them don't taste that great. It's only when we distill, or not distill, when we crush them and ferment them, that sort of thing, that we get a good tasting wine. So what happens is we raise the grapes, and that wine is really an agricultural product. All right, we grow the grapes, and I say we. I used to work in a winery, and I used to work growing grapes and picking grapes out in California and in New York. Because my friend John Williams, who owns Frog's Leap Winery, was my college roommate, and I worked for him for a while. So grapes are grown, and they're tested for their sugar and their acidity. All right, and a good wine balances the two of those things. And we need to have sugars in the grapes because we're going to ferment the grapes, and the yeast has to have sugar to produce the alcohol. So when we grow the grapes, the grapes are picked or harvested, and depending on the kind of grape, but they're usually picked in the fall, late summer, or early fall. Like this, as we're talking, this is October 31st, or November 1st. I mean, pretty much the most of the grapes are already picked. The only grapes that are still not picked, either in the United States or in some other countries, are what we call late harvest grapes, and these are grapes that we want to use to make a very sweet wine. Now, I'm not going to get a whole lot into that, but like a Sauternes wine. By the way, where does Sauternes wine come from? Sauternes, France, right? So that's a very sweet wine. And what happens is the grapes are allowed to stay on the vine a little bit longer, and then they begin to dehydrate. They develop what's called the noble rot. And the noble rot actually is a bacteria, or I don't know if it's a bacteria or a fungus that actually makes the outside of the grape skins porous. Some of the water evaporates, it concentrates the sugar, makes a sweeter wine. So the grapes are picked or harvested. They're then crushed. And when a grape is crushed, then, well, they have a thing called, it's actually called a crusher stemmer. It actually separates the stems and that kind of stuff from the grapes. Crushes the grapes, and then separates the stems and the leaves and stuff from it. They got stuck in there. And then it goes to a press, a wine press. And what a wine press is, the way that they work it nowadays, you used to see in the old days, people would stomp on the grapes. And actually, when I've done some tour groups for John Williams at Frog's Leap Winery, he had me do that one day. And he just didn't want to deal with them. He was too busy. He said, "Would you take them?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll give them a tour." And he said, "You know, here's a couple of buckets." He said, "Why don't you have them?" They had just picked their Sauvignon Blancs. He said, "Why don't you have them take their shoes off and crunch some, you know, press some grapes or crush some grapes?" So that was kind of fun. We had them. They rolled their pant legs up and they were in there without their shoes and socks on, crushing the things in these buckets, and people really liked it. So in the press, it goes into a big machine. It's got a bladder in there that inflates with air, okay, and presses these grapes, and then the juice runs off from the grapes at this point, and the freshly pressed non-fermented juice is called the must, M-U-S-T. And it's the must that we use to ferment to make what we know as wine. So we're removing all the skins and that kind of stuff. This is just juice. It's got some stuff in it. It's going to be microfiltered later on. All right? Now, there are three basic colors of wine. There's white wine, there's rosé or pink wine, and then there's red wine. Okay? White, pink, and red. White wine is fermented, white wine is fermented for about 2 days at cooler temperatures with no skins coming in contact. Rosé wine, well, let me do red first, okay? So white wine is fermented at low temperatures for about 2 days with no skins. Red wine is fermented for 3 to 4 days with the skins in contact with the must. All of the color of wine comes from the skins of the grapes. All the color of wine comes from the skins of the grape. Rosé wine is not made by combining red and white wine together. Okay, rosé wine is made by fermenting the grapes for about 2 days in contact with the skins. Now, you can make, listen carefully when I say this, you can make a white wine from red grapes, but you can't make a red wine from white grapes. I'll say that again. You can make a white wine from red grapes, but you can't make a red wine from white grapes because it's in the color of the skin. Right? In order to ferment wine, yeast is added, and yeast eats the natural sugars of the grapes, the carbohydrates, and it produces two things. It produces CO2 and alcohol. Okay? In most wines, the CO2 is allowed to escape. In making sparkling wines and champagnes, because there is a difference, the CO2 is trapped in the bottle. Now, are there any questions about the basics of how wine is made here? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and stop the recording.